I thought this evening was about the anti-war movement, so I prepared something about the anti-war movement. I'm going to tell you a little bit, I mean, in line of what the brothers and sisters here talked about. With regards to Syria, I personally, along with a lot of Syrians, take the view that a large portion of what is going on in Syria is pretty much induced from the outside. There are regional interests for the likes of the Saudis, the Turks and Qataris that are clashing or have clashed with the line that the Syrian government has taken for the past decades, really, but especially since the invasion of Iraq in 2003. What we are seeing now in Syria has been brewing since actually the invasion of Iraq in 2003, when mainly the Saudi Arabians thought that because of the loss of what they perceived to be Sunni Iraq to the United States Army is going to create a void which is going to be only filled by, because of the demographics of Iraq, by the Shiite Iran, and Shiite Iran being their main rival. Shiite Iran being their main rival, precipitated that they're going to gain another ground in the Middle East, which was going to be Syria, because Syria is a majority Sunni country, and since then we started hearing the term the Shiite Crescent, meaning Tehran, Baghdad, Damascus and Beirut, Hezbollah, in order to frighten and alienate the Sunni component of the people of Iraq, Syria and Lebanon, and let them alienate them from their current governments and the tendency of what we believe to be the axis of resistance. I could speak a lot about what is happening in Syria. Why do I believe this is to be an intervention? But I'm going to choose to stick with the subject, which is the anti-war movement. War is but a tool of politics. War in itself is not an issue in comparison with intervention in the widest sense. Intervention is the issue. That country A believes they have the right and the means to intervene in the being and daily life of other people on the planet under whatever guise, democracy, human rights, you name it, is the problem. War is only a manifestation of it. I'm going to take I am a management consultant by the profession, by the way, so I'm going to talk a little bit from an administrative point of view. Only for us to learn lessons of why such movements don't go on forever and they deliver time and time again what they're supposed to be delivering. I'm going to take the Stop the War Coalition as an example and talk about it a little bit. The question is that, the Stop the War Coalition, I think, biggest achievement probably in the UK was the invasion of Iraq demonstration, in my humble opinion. There were like hundreds of thousands of people, up to 2 million, in the streets of London shouting against the war. Now, a year ago, we are active through the Syrian Social Club in expressing a voice of certain Syrians who believe that the Salafi component is not very much welcomed in Syria. We had a joint sort of demonstration with the Stop the War Coalition in front of the American embassy, and when they were launching something called, Hands Off Iran or whatever it was, and we thought, because we believe the struggle in the current struggle in the Middle East, or the current war in the Middle East, is pretty much aimed at Iran, Syria, and every single resistance, Hezbollah and Hamas. we thought, we could participate with this demonstration. There were only about 25 to 30 people from Stop the War Coalition. We outnumbered them easily. And I was thinking to myself, how come in 8 years' time, an organization like this, supposedly making the same assertions and talking about the same things, could drop its numbers on the street from 2 million people to only 25 or 30 people? How come people are not listening to them? How come they cannot mobilize the public as well as they used to be? And it occurred to me that slowly, again from a management consultant's point of view, these people, when they started and when they were at their peak during the Iraq invasion in 2003, they were honest about what they were saying. They were pretty much genuine in trying to mobilize the people. They were not, giving any damn about the politics or what all this meant to the establishment here in the UK. All they wanted to say is that we are against war, and there are enough people in the UK who are against war, and we're going to make our voices heard. However, come Syria, they seem to be now part of the political scene. They seem to be caring a little bit more about their brand name than they should. People probably don't feel that they are genuine anymore about expressing what they are really trying to achieve. I mean, I went to their website and searched for Syria. At least they're not ignoring Syria. They think, it's clear from the slogans there, they think that, or they've taken the stand that what happened in Syria was a sort of democratic revolution that was hijacked by the Americans and their allies in the region, and now it has turned into a sort of sectarian civil war. Once you take the position that what happened in Syria was a sort of democracy revolution, then what you're really doing is that you're taking the view of the mainstream media here in the UK, and that's shooting yourself in the foot. You should be looking more at what is really happening. If the revolution in Syria, or so to speak, quote unquote, I don't believe it's a revolution. If the crisis in Syria was a struggle for democracy, not even a single Syrian would have stopped against it. But what we have now is a sort of 50-50 split between Syrians, and that cannot be a struggle for democracy and human rights. There has to be something else. But it seems that the Stop the War Coalition movement have taken the view very early on that this is a democracy fight against a tyrant. And I remember well, during that day, in front of the very cold, bitter day, in front of the American embassy, that they did not want us to raise the images of what we believe to be the legitimate president of Syria. And they thought, no, this is going to, distort our image as if we're, supporting dictators. Going back in history, when they stood against the war on Iraq, they couldn't care less about being associated with an image of another dictator called Saddam Hussein. In fact, I would argue, and a lot of people would argue, that the Iraqis under the Saddam Hussein regime or government, especially in the very latest years of his rule, were probably a lot worse in living and democracy and human rights conditions than the Syrians or even the Libyans were ever under Assad or Gaddafi. And going back to the intervention issue, Britain, France, Europe in general, and the US were always intervening. There was no war, still no war on Syria, but the intervention was there and still is. And it's clandestine, covert operations, support, and this is going on under the nose of such a movement without them doing anything about it. They issue some statements here and there, but are they doing anything about it? No. But
what about Libya? That was not a covert operation, that was an overt invasion in Libya. And still, they are not doing anything about it. Now in Mali, I take a slightly different view. And probably I'm going to disagree here with some of the co-panelists. But I think that the French intervention is not the intervention, the foreign intervention, but actually the second foreign intervention. Because I would argue that the Salafi movement in the north of Africa, the north of Mali, is already an intervention that is used by the Qataris, funded by the Qataris, facilitated by the Libyans or the current whoever is running in Libya, in order to gain certain geopolitical gains, or interests, or secure them. And the French are having a second intervention, and the issue here, would the people of Mali want the first intervention? And are they forced to ask for the second one? Because I heard one Malian person or head of the community here clearly saying, well, we want this intervention in order to protect ourselves. There is this friction of religion here as well. So, what I'm saying is that if we're talking about an anti-war movement or any civil movement, they should stop thinking about their own image and stick to their values. And that's only when they're ever going to become effective. Probably the thing that's going to solve it is a change in leadership in the Stop the War Coalition. I don't know. I'm not a member of it. But what I'm a member of is the Palestine Solidarity Campaign. My wife and I, have been active members in that, and we were committee members in our branch in Milton Keynes. And it's interesting what Brother Sukkant here said about it. Yeah, okay. Which is that this is a middle class or European, especially probably English middle class movement, and so on. Now we need, for practical reasons, to take one thing into consideration. Not every single people on this planet do things the way we do it. They have their own way of expressing it. And we have to make benefit of that. If they are not very vocal about imperialism, blah, 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 probably putting it within the framework of a human rights issue, then probably their audience, which is, for example, the UK people, would want to hear such narrative in order to get convinced and form a view of what is really happening in Palestine. Probably, if the Palestine Solidarity Campaign go banging day and night about imperialism, blah, 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 probably they will gain no support whatsoever. It's their way of doing it. And we need to make benefit of that. I think that's all that I wanted to speak about today. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and thank you for listening.